My friends, when we talk about good and evil, beauty and morality, we are not merely discussing some abstract concepts. We are touching on the deepest aspects of the human heart and mind. I have often been asked, how do we make sense of morality without God? And why do we feel the need to define goodness? Today, I want to take you on a journey that seeks to answer one of life's most profound questions. Can there be objective morality without God? Some time ago, a philosopher by the name of Philip Halley was confronted by the raw horror of cruelty. He was researching the brutal atrocities committed by Nazi Germany, and as he witnessed the scale of evil, his soul was torn apart. But in the midst of despair, he stumbled upon the story of a small French village called Les Chambon, where ordinary people took extraordinary risks to protect Jewish children from the Nazis. As Halley read about these acts of goodness, tears flooded his face. Why? Was it an emotional response alone, or was it something deeper, a recognition of something objectively good? The story of Les Chambon is a stark reminder that deep within us we know goodness and evil are not just mere illusions. We recognize cruelty for what it is, and we applaud bravery for love. These are not just societal constructs or mere preferences. But the question is this: why? What is it within us that acknowledges this moral law? Relativism, the belief that moral truths are not absolute but culturally or personally determined, is fashionable today. But let me ask you, if morality is relative, who is to say the actions of the Nazis were objectively wrong? Is it merely one society's opinion against another? Would anyone dare to say the Holocaust was merely a cultural preference of the time? Relativism, my friends, fails to provide any foundation for justice or goodness. If morality is simply a social construct, then there can be no ultimately accountability for the acts of evil. This is why when we experience profound moral revulsion, whether at terrorist attacks or genocides, our hearts cry out for justice, for something more than just human opinion. We feel in our souls that these acts are wrong, objectively wrong, regardless of culture or time. And here is where the moral argument for God comes in. If objective moral values exist, and I believe we all recognize that they do, then there must be a source for these values. They cannot exist in a vacuum. Moral laws imply a moral lawgiver. Just as the laws of nature points to a creator, so too do the laws of morality. They point us to a moral being. Some might argue, but Gino, we don't need God to be moral. True, one can live a moral life without believing in God, but that is not just the point. The issue is not whether you can act morally without believing in God. It is whether there can be any objective moral values in the first place without God. If there is no God, where do we derive this objective moral law from? Why do we feel a sense of guilt or moral failure when we do wrong? Without God, my friends, we are left with two bleak alternatives: nihilism or relativism. And nihilism tells us that life has no meaning, that morality is just an illusion, and that in the end, nothing really matters. The atheist philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche understood this when he proclaimed, "God is dead." He recognized that the death of God meant the death of all objective meaning, purpose, and morality. And yet, we know that this nihilistic worldview is unlivable. No one can look at the suffering of an innocent child or the beauty of selfless love and honestly believe it has no value. We are moral beings because we are created in the image of a moral creator. When you remove God from this equation, you remove the very foundation of good and evil. As a Christian, I believe that the source of morality is found in the character of God. God is not only the creator of the universe, but the source of all that is good. As C.S. Lewis put it, God's moral law is written on our hearts. It is not something we create, it is something we recognize. The villagers of Les Chambon recognized this when they risked their lives to save the Jewish children. They were not acting out of societal convenience, but out of a deep recognition of the intrinsic worth of those they saved. The ultimate answer to the problem of evil and the question of morality lies in the person of Jesus Christ. In his life, death, and resurrection, we see the embodiment of perfect goodness and the triumph of love over evil. Jesus did not just speak of morality, he lived it. And he offered us the way to be reconciled to God when we fall short. So my friends, as we think about the moral landscape, I invite you to consider this. If you acknowledge that there is such a thing as good and evil, if you recognize the existence of an objective moral law, then you must ask from where this law comes from. Is it merely a human invention, or does it point to something greater, to someone greater? The existence of objective moral values is one of the clearest pointers to the existence of God. It is not just about understanding right and wrong. It is about knowing the very one who is the source of all goodness. And in him we find not only morality but meaning, purpose and hope for this world. Thank you for listening to me. Please do subscribe for more content.